Today's creation is Strawberry Mountain, and it's actually a pancake breakfast. I just had one tiny little leftover kind of waffle to put on it, and I did what you should never do. You see how my cream is melting out? Well, with coconut cream, I don't know if it works the same with the with normal cream, but with coconut cream, you stick I did the right thing for the bottom pancake, and I let it cool. I remembered, but then because I was very tired, I hadn't woken up properly yet, and James had gotten over because he was excited about breakfast, I guess, and I hadn't made it yet, and so it was too early for me. I wasn't on my schedule, and I messed it up. So, you never, ever, ever put the coconut cream with the hot pancakes or the hot waffles. You put it with the cold. So, if you put it on top, that's okay. It'll run a little bit on a warm waffle. But if you sandwich it between waffles, well, it's going to stay really warm in there. It's going to melt all over the place. So, that's what happens. So, what I did is, to make it properly, you cook your pancake, you let it cool on the plate, and then you, like what I did is, in the frying pan, since the honey that we have is unpasteurized and it's hard, I put the honey on top of the pancake once I flipped it over so that it would melt on there. So there's the honey, and then I put the layer of coconut cream, and that was fine from the fridge. So it was nice and all fluffy and nice and thick. And then I cooked my other pancake, and it all went wrong because I at that point, it looked really good, and I was like, oh yes, I'm just about ready. And then I put the other pancake on, and I'm like, oh no, what have I done? And so I stuck it in the fridge, but it was still too late. Like, it was just, there was too much warmth there. And so I tried to rush out here right away to get this all set up, and it's still a mess. But I imagine it tastes good.
It tastes great.
So James wanted to get out to talk more about the Noir Comics.
Yeah, that's the main reason why I haven't rushed over. I'm always enthused about the prospect of a pancake breakfast, but the main reason, I just wanted to make sure this book has got to go back today.
Yes.
It's an emergency. Now, of course, I forgot to set it out.
Because it's from the library.
Night.
It's a borrowed book from the library.
So,
Nick came in from Raymond, it looks like. That's what it says.
Raymond is a dry town, but obviously they don't have much standards about violence.
Yeah, noir. It's very, very rough.
I just want to check and see. One, two,
Oh, I'm drinking hot lemon and honey. That's my breakfast.
3, 5. So out of 374 pages or so, I've read all but 6 pages, but I'm not reviewing, just in case we've got some anal retentive people back there in internet land. So I'm not reviewing this right now.
Because you have 6 pages left.
6 pages left, and those 6 pages are the part of the index.
Okay.
So the
You'll
only
review
reason
it
why
at
I
a later
mention
date.
this, I'm going to review it at a later date, but it's going to be a segue into
Noir.
Noir Comics, because I started this off before I did Noir Comics basically in 1 day.
Yeah.
Well, it was less than 1 day. But I started off the Jack the Ripper thing. I'm telling you right now, this thing I didn't pay any money for, got it for free, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to say it's
The
got some
libraries are great.
lots of photos. Let me just see, 48 photos. So 48 pages of photos, not 48 photos. 48.
Wow,
and
that's
some
a
of
lot
them-
of photos.
Well, I mean, that's part of the appeal, I suppose, for some people of the book. You know, apparently he was expecting it to be stolen from libraries by people who, you know, dig gruesomeness and
Really?
stuff like that.
Wow.
Well, you know, they were for some serial killers, they check libraries out to see if they've taken gruesome stuff like this stuff out. You know
Huh.
what I'm saying?
That's actually a good idea.
I guess, although
Yeah.
strictly speaking, I suppose libraries' checkout lists shouldn't be available to the public or to the powers that be. But I suppose
Well-
when you're dealing with a serial killer,
Yeah.
you got to do what you got to
And
do.
well, honestly, I think it's just good to have the material in the library anyway for people.
Oh, this sort of stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about the police shouldn't be allowed to check stuff up. It's
Yeah, I
interesting
know.
to see in
It
this.
is.
You know,
I
this
I
was
don't know. I used to like it when I guess I'm just not accustomed to people not thinking like me. Even still, when I realize that people don't.
yeah.
But I loved it when there were the little cards at the back of the book, and you'd be like, "Ha! There
Right.
I am!" You know, I checked it out in like 2 years ago, and there's
And you'd
there's
recognize
me.
your
You know,
exactly right, but they wouldn't have a way of identifying you or anything.
yeah, they did. Your name was there.
You got to be kidding.
No, the cards. You don't remember that.
Which cards?
The checkout cards at the back of the book.
Was this Grand Prairie you're talking?
This was like every library, I think. You had your name on there. There was a little name and there was a date when you took it out. They stamped the date and you had your name
I
there.
can't recall.
Well, it's how it was.
Maybe, yeah. Grand Prairie was quite small by comparison with Lethbridge. So, maybe they did. At any rate,
Like somebody once said to me, they were talking about that 70s show and they were like, well, you were there in the 70s. It wasn't like that. And I was like, honestly, you know,
You
I was
barely remember.
I was on
You
the
were
farm
5.
in the 70s and it was the 60s. You know?
What was the 60s?
When it was the 70s for everyone else.
Oh,
On
I
the
see
farm
what
it
you're
was
saying.
the
Yeah, I
60s.
see
Like
what you're
in the
saying.
rural communities, it
Yeah.
wasn't the same.
Yeah, I'm still trying to wake up.
Mhm.
The meds I take kind of make it me. Sometimes I'm trying to wake up one day from the previous day. So,
Like there was one woman, she was beautiful. She would come to the I don't know if like now thinking about it, he might have been an adopted son or something. Because she was a lot older, but she wore a great big beehive and pink house coat. She'd come out and bring him to the bus. You know, he was just a little gaffer like me, and I didn't know him or anything. But yeah, she had a big pink, blonde beehive, and I told my dad about how beautiful, you know, she was and coming out, and he was like, "It's a wig."
yeah.
And he was always ruining things for me. And she'd look so beautiful in the morning, you know, coming out.
Well, you know, like wigs can be beautiful. What the heck? Yeah. So, yeah, it doesn't matter if it's a wig or not. But what was I going to say? Yeah, I went through the 70s, and I guess I was age something like 16 to 26, coming through the 70s. And that 70s show is nothing about the 70s. I don't know. They're kind of walking around in funny things that look funny, fashions that look funny, but that's about it. Nothing to do with the 70s. It's hilarious. I suspect it was the same sort of thing. I can barely remember the 50s, and I was in Africa for almost all of the 50s, maybe 1959, in Regina, Saskatchewan. My strong suspicion is that the 50s weren't anything like Happy Days, you know, with Ronnie Howard and the phones and all that sort of stuff. The memories I have of 1959, Regina, are nothing like that. So, not as though I was hanging around Pop's chocolate shop or whatever it was. That's from Archie Andrews. And Archie actually was developed during World War II.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, weird. The weird thing is, I thought it was earlier. You know, like Blondie, I think dates from the 20s.
Yeah.
She was like a flapper or something like that. I could be wrong. Archie, I
Well,
did
that's
check
the
that
thing.
out.
Like, we're watching movies now from my youth because
Yeah.
we opened a time capsule.
Yeah,
Of
yeah.
sorts.
It's awesome because it's
great.
beta.
Because
It's not VHS.
So
Beta machine.
the stuff is from like when I was 10 years old or whatever, right? And it's wonderful. There's all these tapes of, like, at the time, my dad beta was obsolete, right? And so he was able to get a beta machine for like $1 at a garage sale, and then he'd fix them up. Sometimes they wouldn't work right, but he'd fix them up.
A very handy
And
kind
then,
of guy, right?
Yeah, he could.
They're not just
he was
farm
awesome.
equipment and stuff.
So, and we had a whole bunch of beta tapes and stuff. Anyway, so we had these beta machines and we had great movies. It started with my dad realizing that I liked Alfred Hitchcock, because I would stay up very late at night and I'd watch Alfred Hitchcock Presents on
This was
Friday
when you
night.
were young, right?
Yes, when I was 10.
When I
And-
was 10, I found him kind of scary. You know what
Oh,
I'm saying?
sure.
So,
But I was reading Stephen King at
And-
that point,
yeah.
and really I wasn't sleeping very well
Yeah.
because I was reading Stephen King at that point. So anyway, my dad realized I like Alfred Hitchcock, and so he got Rear Window and Vertigo. Borrowed them from a video store, and his favorite was Vertigo, but I liked Rear Window.
I
It
prefer
was my
Rear Window.
favorite movie.
I like both of them.
And it was my favorite movie for years. I'd watch it over and over. I just loved it. And you know what? I think it might be my favorite movie still. It's so awesome. But there's a few great movies out there, and like one of them we were watching yesterday, The Seven Faces of Dr. Lowe, because Dad had watched that when he was a kid, and so he was trying to introduce me to stuff that he liked when he was young, right? At that point, and I loved it. I was
So
like,
that
this is
dated
great.
from 1963,
Yeah.
and your dad, we figured out
He would have been
rough-
about my age.
9 years
At-
old.
Yeah, at that time. And so, I love that movie. And so he was showing me all these things, and some of the stuff I didn't care for so much, and other things I really loved. But
So
was
that
one of
Dr.
them.
Lowe thing, before we move on to something,
Oh.
that was a revelation to me, because Tony Randall to me was what I know from Odd Couple and then
Is it?
from Interview. Well, I was going to do this. Well, we might as well talk about that. I just thought he was the anal retentive character he was largely portraying on The Odd Couple. And in Interview, he seemed the same way, like anal retentive when it came to knowledge. The kind of person that you'd expect to really win a Trivial Pursuit, but also maybe a Quadrivial Pursuit, which is in case someone picks up the idea, that's my idea, okay? So I've got a copyright on it, Quadrivial Pursuit. It would be for the sciences. You could come up with it, but the trouble is
Nobody would
no
care
one would
for
buy
it anyway.
because it wouldn't include like entertainment, and it wouldn't include music, but it'd be like classical music or stuff that really mattered. I like Beyonce, but it wouldn't include hip hop idiots and all that sort of stuff. But so I just thought, when Pauline said this has Tony Randall in it, I said, I like Tony Randall in The Odd Couple. He's quite funny, you know. Was he playing Felix Unger, or was
but
that the other guy?
watch The Seven Faces of Dr. Lowe.
Wow.
Watch it.
Yeah,
And at
because
first you'll-
I was going to say, I thought it would be just Tony Randall playing himself,
Yeah.
you know. And so I get down there, and he's playing. Go ahead. What he's playing?
He plays. I shouldn't give it away,
No.
but all of the characters at the circus, that's him. He's playing all of them.
So he's playing seven faces, but actually
Yeah.
some of those faces are doing other voices.
That's true.
So
like
there's no Scottish character, but one of his characters is doing a Scottish one.
Yeah, so he does all sorts of accents. He does all sorts of people. Like he really gets into different characters. So it's very impressive if you want to see some exceptional acting, then
Comic
watch it
acting,
just for that.
which people
you know?
don't take that,
And-
that seriously.
And yeah, so occasionally
Well, I do.
he'll do something like he'll speak really calmly, calm English. Okay, because first he's the first character you're introduced to that he plays is Dr. Lo, and he's a Chinese man. And a lot of people watching today would go, "Oh, this is offensive," you know, some guy playing a Chinese man, or like you may not know that it's Tony Randall playing a Chinese guy because he's awesome.
This
So
is
you might think that
1963.
he's a Chinese guy. And so he's putting on the Chinese, a Chinese accent at that time.
It's made up to.
Yeah. And
Or-
so you might be thinking, oh, that's so offensive, you know, the way he's speaking, whatever. Well, you know, some people speak like that even today. And people would have back then. And
Was
he
he
did a good
making
job
fun
of
of the accent?
He wasn't
No,
making fun of
this
it
is the
because
hero
Dr. Lo
of
is the
his-
hero. And
He's actually bringing something like civilization to
Yeah.
the Wild West.
exactly. So if you turn it on and you're like, oh, this is offensive right away, okay, go. Turn it off and go live your pretentious life.
Pretentious,
If you actually
yeah.
want to realize that people weren't racist back then,
Some people were, but
Yeah, sure.
the majority of the people in the United States
yeah,
weren't.
yeah.
There'd be something like racial prejudice. That was a common word back
Then
then.
watch
It's
Dr. Lo.
just totally disappeared.
Yeah.
What used to be racial prejudice.
And you
It's called
see,
racist.
there's some people in the show that are not nice people. You know, like they don't portray capitalists very well, and there's one woman that she's vain and she is not portrayed well, and anyway, she at one point Dr. Lo sits beside her in a town hall assembly, and she gets up and she moves.
Yeah.
So
And the bad guys are one of
nothing
them
is said about it, you know, but you get it. If you're watching, you're like, oh my gosh, she is.
She's an awful person.
Yeah, but
That's the way
at
she's
the end, you're
portrayed in the
hoping
movie.
that she changes because the capitalist has changed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So he's not
you
out
never know.
to rip the
The town off.
townspeople up.
Yeah,
And so yeah, that's coming out of Hollywood. There's one indigenous person
I think
portrayed
he was
in it, and he's
probably a
portrayed
native
sympathetically.
person. James
He might
does
have
not
been.
believe that he
I
was
think he
actually
was
a native
actually
person.
being portrayed
But-
by a white person.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is, like, I don't know if you remember the Beachcombers, but I liked the Beachcombers when I was young. But there were some indigenous actors on there, and
There
they
was
were okay.
one character called Jesse.
Yeah.
And that would be from
Did
the
a
early 70s
okay job.
initially.
But in, like, James and I were talking about it, back in the 70s, they were really trying, like, the people involved with films in Canada were really trying to get indigenous people into films.
Hollywood was the same way. Little
Yeah.
Big Man
So,
had Chief Dan George from Canada.
yeah. So, it's not that they were racist back then, and that's why you weren't seeing a lot of Native people in the 60s. They didn't act, and people wouldn't have watched the films because they didn't act in the same way. And the same thing with Asian people. If you watch, it would have been more like William Shatner with every Asian person. If you watch how traditional Chinese acting was, it's over the top. It totally is.
By our standards.
Yeah. By our
William
standards.
Shatner.
So,
The reason why he's over the top is
well,
he's
he's a stage actor, and that's what the Chinese acting
Mhm.
was. They were stage actors. So it would be over the top for the film. So that's why I think Dr. Lo was an Asian man,
Well,
played by Tony Randall.
you see, the problem is
Tony Randall is at the apex of a huge population in the United States. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, how many people would be able to speak English, be an English actor, English-speaking actor, would have Tony Randall's skills?
Yeah.
Exactly. Back then, one, maybe, probably none.
Besides
People
him.
from Hong Kong.
Yeah.
I'm talking about people, of Asian ancestry.
Sure.
None.
Yeah.
I suspect. Maybe,
Okay.
people. So, who would be available to Hollywood? Hong Kong. Oh, we're bringing someone in from Hong Kong who can do a bunch of different accents. See, that's the deal. And when you look at indigenous people acting in the 70s, generally, like everyone is going gaga over Chief Dan George and Little Big Man. And he just wasn't that good. It was borderline embarrassing. So, Hollywood, people that go around, they look at some of these things. They look at Star Trek and they say, I've been to academic kind of presentations, and they'll laugh at Star Trek about how imperialist is, or whatever, settler colonialist is. You have no clue how almost like revolutionary was, because the big hero, he's Captain James Tiberius Kirk. Of course, what they're not saying is James is a Scottish name, Kirk is a Scottish name, Tiberius is kind of like this ridiculous, the people. Is he supposed to be a Roman emperor? Tiberius was a nasty emperor. The people who are like the Romans are the Romulans. Are they good people or bad people? They're up there with the Klingons for being bad people, from what I gather. No, so I think they're going around saying Klingons, they're being othered and stuff. Yeah, you tell me people that look like Klingons. You tell me people are like the Romulans. The Romulans are from the past. They're like the ancient Romans. I think they were intending that. So like even Russians were represented. What's the name? Chekhov?
Yeah.
He's one of the good guys. So it's not as though they were othering the Russians even. I don't know what Sulu was. Was he supposed to be Japanese or something like that?
My guess is but I don't know.
Oriental or whatever. Was there a black person It's a black woman.
Uhura, she was
she
awesome.
The navigator or something like that? Or was
Communications
Sulu,
expert.
Communications. Sulu maybe was the navigator and stuff like that. So she was there. She had something like a Swahili name or something like that. So I don't know. People are going around saying that's racist and imperial. Wow, that's just disgusting. It's just people going back and projecting their, frankly, prejudices back to those times. God damn it all. I don't like cussing, but I'm sick of this stupid stuff. Anyway.
Yeah, get on to Noir.
No, Noir stuff.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
There
That
we
should
go.
be
That should
plenty
be enough.
to talk about that comic or the drawing.
So I'm not going to show you the pictures from Jack the Ripper. They're actually not that many gruesome pictures, but it set me up for this this stuff. Like this guy did Batman. There's a little. It's basically telling you how to set things up. There's not that much technical. There's a little bit about gum erasers and so on and so forth. But it's basically how to set things up, like where to put caption boxes and word balloons and so on and so forth. But this is kind of... So he has like maybe a 16-page graphic novel, and it's very graphic. Here's spoiler alert. Just in case you're interested. Here's some of the bad guys being taken out by other bad guys. So this is one of his this is bodyguard or something like that for the bad guy, the ultra bad guy, and he's getting his brains blown out right towards you.
Yeah.
And then here's the really bad guy getting blown away by one of the maybe not so bad guys. there's his brains are getting blown away from you, but you see the entry wound and then the brains being splattered. I won't show it to Pauline because she doesn't like this kind of. I'm not a big fan of it either, but so I was kind of set up for it and so on and so forth. But yeah, this is not to me what comic books are. Yeah, I'm going to show you what comic books really are. I reviewed this already. Rupert the Bear. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know that.
You're not seeing his brain.
It creeps me out because the little guys, the rabbits, the whatever, they're cute, but they have human hands, and it's just I find it really disturbing.
That's kind of weird.
It's like little children are walking around with animal heads on them.
It doesn't disturb me, but I guess it is. There's Rupert the Bear with a book in his hands.
Yeah.
That's funny. I think he has one tooth. He actually has 4 fingers.
I suppose.
You know what I'm saying? And a thumb, an opposable thumb. That's not like Disney stuff.
Yeah.
American cartoons, they got 3 fingers, simplifying things. But when it gets too far away from Rupert the Bear and stuff like that, I don't have much use for comics. So here's something that I'm going to be reviewing in further detail. Batman, the greatest stories ever told. Well, that's a bit over the top there.
Nobody thinks Batman's a hero.
He was supposed to be kind of like an anti-hero from the start. He was kind of a guy with a big jaw and so on and so forth. Do I have... I didn't bring... Yeah. So I'll show you the guy who created Batman. Bob Kane. I always thought he was an old guy. Because he was an old guy when I was a kid, but he was a young pup, and most of these guys are. Here's Lois Lane, by the guy who conceived of how to portray Superman. So a lot of these guys are just like, they should be wearing glasses over glasses, but Bob Kane wasn't that way. So here he is. Yeah. So anytime you see Batman, they'll say created by Bob Kane. Say he was very possessive. Batman created by Bob Kane. He was very possessive, and as he should have been, because Siegel and Schuster, a couple of Canadian guys who created Superman, they weren't compensated. They were ripped off by a guy who eventually became a very, very big business guy. Are you going to show them the picture? Bob Kane, exactly right. I'm still trying to wake up. So there he is. He's got a fantabulous, what Dave Letterman would call a babe. Exactly right. And it looks as though she was his model for this picture and stuff like that. But they say it was basically a studio. He'd had a studio churning Batman out, and he was out gallivanting, checking out the chicks. And again, that's would be the way he'd be looking, probably calling them broads, like Frank Sinatra.
Sure.
Hey, just broad, I'll be reviewing that one further. So this is just in context with the noir stuff. So there's some good Batman stuff in here. There's one, these are, here's some Neil Adams stuff. You compare Neil Adams with this idiot who is producing a film, noir stuff.
Yeah, well, the Joker is scary.
The Joker is scary.
I mean, in Batman, that's one thing. The bad guys are really bad guys. They're very scary.
They can be, exactly right. The best Batman I've ever run across, it didn't make it in here,